G'day and welcome to the Mind Your Body Show, episode number 57. Today I'm talking to Blake Worrall Thompson. So if you'd like to know more about living your life by design, stay tuned. Are you an athlete who wants to maximize your performance and succeed at the top level? Stop wasting time on generic programs. Get started with a 2-week intro package today. Head to jacobandre.com to get started. jacobandreae.com, and we'll link all that up in the show notes. Okay, so getting on to this week's testimonial of the week, and this comes from Jasmine Hewitt, AFLW player with the Adelaide Crows, also previously with Gold Coast. I worked with her in my time doing the remote coaching with the Crows and absolutely loved my time with this athlete of a person. Jazz is amazing. So Jazz says, before training with Jacob, I was struggling with awareness of running technique. I lacked an understanding of balance, load versus recovery, and how when to increase and decrease load for overall performance improvement. My sessions had less direction and were more on-the-spot training. Training with Jacob impacted the results I was getting through improved running technique, which resulted in better balance and speed. Thank you so much, Jasmine, for those kind words. And I am trying really hard to get Jasmine, now that she's not playing AFLW, after coming back for a season and winning a grand final in that season. She's now an airport fire. I really wanted to train her for 400s or 400-meter hurdles. I reckon she'd be a cracking athlete and go away and try a hand at some athletics. All right, so this week's comment of the week on Instagram is actually several. You can join the party on this by heading to Instagram and going to my account at Jacob_Andre. And in this one, this is a post from late 2022, which was a lower body strength session. And in here, we've got a couple of comments from people. So Israel, who says, killer workout. Becky Taylor says, going all right there, old boy. Love seeing a coach walk their talk. Thank you very much. It's something that means a lot to me. I think you need to walk your talk as much as you possibly can. I hear from Beckham Baker, former guest on the Mind Your Body show and up-and-coming superstar of a soccer player. This is a good one for footballers. Thank you. Thank you, Beckham. This person here, the king of Leros, perfect depth. Yes, definitely need to have nice, good depth in those ass to grass squats. Not that you need to be doing that all the time. However, in this video I was. And then lastly, Christos, forms on point. Thank you, Christos. I appreciate your acknowledgement there of my form with my squats and getting deep for a guy who's 39, nearly 40. Actually, by the time this episode comes out, I'll probably be 40. All right, so moving on to this week's episode with Blake Worrall Thompson. Blake is actually someone who was a writer for one of the national health magazines in Australia. I'm not sure which one it was. It might have been Men's Health. I come across him on Instagram. He was more into fitness stuff. Now he's a bit more into the lifestyle side of things. Hence the topic here, living your life by design. He has a program which is all about living your life by design. You can check him out on Instagram by looking up Blake Worrall Thompson and checking out his program and applying even for his one-on-one coaching if you would like to. But we talked in this episode a lot of woo-woo stuff. So woo-woo stuff is a bit more spiritual without it being like, it's not religious type stuff. It's a bit more universal, the universe, I don't know, like energies and things like that. So we talked a little bit of woo-woo. I really loved that we could relate on that. Breaking your year up, which is a concept I've heard of previously, and I really liked Blake's take on that. So sort of breaking your year up into seasons, or what Blake does is to do like a 10-week block type thing and then take a holiday or take a break from work. I think that is really smart to do. It's kind of what athletes do in terms of periodization. And I think that every person can do that with their life. He talks about how he lives his life by design and how you can too, morning routines, and his mammoth 5-hour morning routine, which is crazy, which obviously as a single father of 4, it's not something that I have the luxury of getting, but something that Blake himself acknowledges is probably not going to be possible for forever. And maybe if he has kids soon, he's probably not going to be able to do that 5-hour routine. But the importance of routines, nonetheless, regardless of how long those morning routines are. We talk about self-care, your why, and understanding your why and being connected with your why. Men's business is very big, I believe. Plant medicine, which is really interesting, and something that you don't really hear two blokes talk about too often, and that is love. And I absolutely loved talking about love with Blake. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Blake Worrall Thompson. Blake, welcome to the Mind Your Body Show.
Jacob, good to be here, my friend.
Well, I am going to start with the same question we ask everybody at the beginning, and that is, what did we interrupt in your day today?
Mate, you actually didn't interrupt a huge amount, because this is kind of perfect for me in terms of a lot of podcasting at the moment. For our own podcast, while I was in Thailand for 6 weeks, and we did a big kind of reach out the first week of January, actually, and a lot of people came back. So I'm doing probably between 10 and 15 podcasts a week at the moment, which I really enjoy doing. And we actually got our podcast sorted till the end of July in terms of recordings and interviews, mate. So this slides straight into what's keeping me busy at the moment.
Perfect timing. What's the name of your podcast?
The Momentum Lifestyle Project. So I've got my own coaching business. And then with my best mate, we've got a men's coaching business as well. So what are we? I think about 75 episodes in, and getting really cool people on, which, you know, as a podcaster yourself, you'll understand, just love having, you know, good epic conversations, networking with, you know, really interesting people and learning, and then being able to, you know, provide that platform to our listeners who can also learn and grow from all our guests that come onto it.
Yeah, you mentioned a word just then, networking, and I think that's a really key word, because the reason, and I'd love to know why you started your podcast, but the reason why I started was I was having these amazing conversations with these amazing people, and I thought this would be so cool to share this. And so I then started a podcast to try to share them. But then what I found was that I was then reaching out to people that I wouldn't otherwise have access to, usually through Instagram. And people are more than happy to come on and chat. And like, I love hearing people's stories, and it's such a great way to network. I honestly think it's the way of networking in 2023.
Mate, I love it. It's and I just love, you know, similar to you, if you're in this space, I just love, you know, equal parts learning, equal parts growing, you know, and equal parts networking. And there's so much for us to learn from everyone. And again, you know, it might seem a bit strange to reach out on, you know, Instagram and just like, can we have a chat? As opposed to actually having some kind of tool, being a podcast, to get them on, have a chat, you know, get to know them better and network that way. So, mate, I love podcasting, and, you know, I'm in a fortunate position where it plays a really, you know, good part of my life in conjunction with coaching and the programs that I run as well. So I feel very fortunate to have this, you know, nice balance of podcasting and coaching and programs.
Yeah. So what is some of your favorite podcasts that you like to listen to outside of your own? Personally, for me, James Wedmore's one is one I really like. He's in sort of business coaching and he's a little bit woo-woo. But what's one for you?
Mate, I'll have to follow up on that one because I haven't heard of it. And if it's a bit woo-woo and a bit business, I'm all in. There's a few for me. I really like the Diary of the CEO, Stephen Bartlett, who's getting a lot of good traction. Big fan of Joe Rogan, Aubrey Marcus, Chris Williamson with Modern Wisdom. There are probably 4 or 5 that I really like. And I think for me now, because, you know, I guess I kind of take my own podcasting quite seriously, I'm looking at little things that they do that make a podcast and an experience better. You know, and I guess something that I pride myself on and want to constantly deliver on is asking better questions for these people that come on. And, you know, Chris Williamson, for me, probably at the moment, along with Joe Rogan, those are the 2 guys that, you know, I think ask the best questions and are really, really in it. You know, there's some other podcasts that I like. I don't mind the School of Greatness with Lewis Howes. That there's a couple of parts of the way his interviewing style that doesn't resonate with me completely. But mate, anything kind of business, mindset, health, wealth, woo-woo, I'm generally kind of interest in it.
Yeah, well, the James Wedmore one that I just mentioned, it's actually called the Mind Your Business podcast. And my title, the Mind Your Body Show, is a version of that, like imitation is the greatest form of flattery. And so I actually met him in 2015 and went over to Laguna for an online workshop. And there's a whole bunch of manifestation that went even into that trip. And then the stuff that came from that was amazing. But like we went out surfing together in Laguna Beach, and so he's just a phenomenal guy. And if you're into a little bit of woo-woo and you're open to that stuff, then you will love the stuff that he's talking about.
Mate, I'm deep in the woo-woo. So I've just written it down actually here. I'll be tracking it down after this podcast. Okay. So you say I'm deep in the woo-woo. Can you explain woo-woo for anyone that doesn't really understand it, and tell me a bit more about how you're deep into it? Yeah. So woo-woo, myself and my girlfriend are big on it. She's got a podcast as well.
What's that one called?
Called Hey Sunshine.
Yep.
So we're big on it, and it's really kind of a mix of, spirituality, magic, mystic. Even for me, psychedelics plays a big part in my life, as I kind of expand consciousness and heal my own ways of being. But I guess to kind of describe, because people would call me woo-woo, and I don't even know how best to describe it. But just the alternative, is probably the simplest way to describe it. And the way that I guess do life, the way that I think, is the norm for me now, and especially the type of people that I surround myself with. But if you're looking at the way I do things from the outside, you'd probably say it's pretty woo. And I guess, there's a number of things and reasons that people would categorize one as woo, but I'm pretty open in, talking about kind of psychedelics. My girlfriend loves kind of angel cards. We live in Byron Bay, probably a number of reasons that you could kind of categorize us as woo. But again, this is just our environment, and these are the type of people that we surround ourselves with. And, we love doing life this way. So I can't kind of ever imagine, I guess, going back to doing life the way that I used to do it.
Yeah. So are you into manifestation and anything like that?
I am. So my business partner is a meditation teacher, and obviously my girlfriend's really big on kind of the manifestation. It's probably one area that I actually don't feel that skilled in for kind of mindset and the, I guess in terms of my own learnings and my own research, I do a lot of research, like more than anyone I know. But the manifestation is something that I feel under equipped in. And interestingly, I'm going to do a fair bit of it in Q3 this year. So I kind of break my year up into quarters. Q2 being very trauma and nervous system based, and then Q3 being manifestation. So there will be a lot of research from my side of things coming into kind of the manifestation in the second half of the year.
That again, man, this is starting to already blow my mind a little bit. So can you please explain in a bit more detail why you break your year up like that into quarters?
Yeah. So my whole year runs almost like a school year in terms of 10 weeks on, 2 weeks off, 10 weeks on, 2 weeks off. So for me, my programs that I run are 10 weeks. I've got 3 at the one time going at the moment. And it really, for me, is a good period of time to go hard for the 10 weeks and then have 2 weeks off. And often in those 2 weeks, I'll go away by myself for a week and just kind of have downtime and think about what's working, what's not, what I want to change. And then Shani, my partner, and I will go away for a week and, have another week to kind of freshen up before we start Q2. So, within each week, I've actually got it here, actually. I'll just put it in front. Just those that are listening won't be able to see anything, but essentially this is my 10-week habit tracker. So I've got, my own kind of themes and goals that I'm really focusing on for the 10 weeks. Which are reassessed every week, but really in terms of a big review is done at the end of Q1. And, for me, the big part of, and I guess my message is life by design. How do you want to design your life? And that requires you to break away from the one standard protocol of how life is done and really start to kind of think about how you want to do life. And for me, 10 weeks on, 2 weeks off, 10 weeks on, and having 8 weeks of holidays a year and 10-week blocks is my life by design at this stage of my life. So, I feel so fortunate to have, I guess, broken away from, the traditional and the one way of doing life and created the one that I want for me.
Yeah, it's so funny that you said that, because Lewis Howes, I've heard him talk about it, and you mentioned his podcast earlier, and he talks about breaking your life up into seasons. And it's kind of similar to how like an elite athlete would be breaking their training program up and periodizing it. And so I am a teacher by trade, was teaching PE, left that, started doing fitness full time. And then I realized after a couple of years, like 2 years of doing it, that I'd actually created the same thing as what you do in school. And it was exactly that. It was 10 weeks on, 2 weeks off every single time. And I was like, all I've done is just created my own version of school, but it works really, really well. I like it.
Mate, I love it. And again, one of the things that I'm really big on is finding what works for you. Do you know what I mean? Like, if I go more than 10 weeks, and I'm mindful that this could be a placebo, if I go for more than 10 weeks, I feel like I'm running on the spot, in terms of I'm not giving much anyway. So I might as well take 2 weeks off, freshen up, and then I come back with my cup full and I'm good to go. So if I really put in 10 weeks is about my bandwidth before I need a bit of a break to freshen up, because I'm no good to me, but more importantly, I'm no good to anyone else once I get to that point of like, a half full cup. And I find it interesting, equal parts kind of sad of how many of us are running on an empty cup or giving from like a 3/4 empty cup. Like I always want to be giving from a full cup. And, if life was perfect, that'd be the case. And I have my moments as well. But, the big thing for me is to be of service. And in order to be of service, I need to be fit for service. And in order to be fit for service, I need to be good mentally, emotionally, energetically, spiritually. I need to constantly be evolving and working on my own shit in order to be able to provide a better service and to be a better me. So, in order to freshen up and to be fit for service, it's not just about me. It's about being able to be better for everyone else.
Yeah. So you're kind of alluding to it. So it's a perfect segue into my next question, which is, how do you mind your body? Like, what do you do outside of breaking your year up like that in order to be the best that you can be physically and mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and so on?
Mate, the list is long, but it's, I'm in a really fortunate position where my morning routine is generally about 5 hours from 5 a.m. and I don't actually start work till 10. And no doubt when I have kids in the next couple of years, that'll probably change. But I really get to, tick all my boxes when it comes to my values before I even start my day. So I get up at 5 a.m., meditation, journaling, generally train for a couple of hours, nutrition, spend a bit of time connecting with my partner, do some reading, and then I start my day. So by the time I actually start my day, all of my top 6 values have been touched on. And, for me, one of the best things that you can do for yourself mentally is really have a deep understanding of what your values are. And what I've found is that, working with probably about over 500 people over the last 3 years, is that like, if I say, what are your values? People generally go, oh, it's this, this, and this. And on a lot of occasions, they're not actually their values, they're society's values, or they're the values of the immediate group that they're part of. And that is one of the reasons that's, a lot of people struggle with their own kind of state of mind, is because they're living someone else's values, society's values. They're living by, expectations that, other people are putting on them, the parents are putting on them, as opposed to going like, what is it that I want? And how do I start to formulate and create that for myself? And it seems like a simple question. What do you want? But you'll be amazed how many people struggle to answer that question. If I ask them like, what is it that you want? They're like, oh, I know what I don't want. And I'm like, well, cool. Okay, let's start there. What is it that you don't want? And then we can start to work towards what you want. But a lot of people don't know what they want, which makes it really hard to create that life by design for themselves.
Yeah. So for me, I've always said it's like family. And I know that's a very societal thing, especially if you are a parent. And so I've always found it easier to just go, yeah, family is number one. But I had a really eye-opening experience in the middle of July of 2022. I was on a holiday to the Gold Coast and I was with my kids, and I realized, and I contacted an intuitive healer that I knew, and I just had this real urge. I needed to do something. I needed to contact her. Funnily enough, she actually sent me a message on Facebook Messenger saying she needed to chat. So I was sort of thinking about it for a few days, and then all of a sudden she's reached out to me. So I said, hey, I want to, like do some stuff. So we did a Zoom coaching call, went for like over 2 hours. And she helped me realize that travel was actually my number one value ahead of family. And if I actually started, because I hadn't traveled a lot since 2019, and if I started to incorporate more regular travel into my life, it would help me to be a better father, teacher, coach, friend, everything. And so my question though is, how can you incorporate travel into your life if that's your like number one value?
It's so interesting. So the word selfish for most people comes with a negative connotation. I can totally understand and see why. So what I generally get people to do, instead of thinking about how they can be selfish and have their own needs met, is think about kind of self-care. And self-care, really, a big part of that is working out what your values are and being able to fulfill them. So the way that I'll often speak to people around this is understanding that when you're not your best, you're not actually that good or to the level that you could be for other people. So in order to be the best, you do need to fill your own cup. And again, people, especially mothers, and I'm sure you can kind of understand this, like a lot of mothers, there's this conditioning and programming that we're starting to collapse. But essentially, up until recent times, the pinnacle for a mother, which is mind-blowing to think that we went through this for so long, was to be the most selfless person that they could be for partner, kids, and like sacrifice their own sense of self and what they want in order to give to everyone else. And, a big part for me when helping them break away from that conditioning is like, again, what do you want? Is it travel? Is it going to the gym? And again, if we're talking about relationships and if I'm working with a couple, having them understand that each person is going to be better for you when they've got their own cup full, everyone wins. And again, like I'm going to have to shorten my morning routine when I have kids, no doubt. But like, if I get my own needs met by myself first thing in the morning, then I'm better for my partner. I'm better for my clients. I'm better for my business partner. So it's really important to understand from a self-care point of view, like, what do you need and how do you get those needs met? And often, how can you meet them yourself? And I'm in a really fortunate position where, I don't need, albeit I love the people in my world, but I don't need them to fulfill a wound or a trigger or a trauma or a need within myself. I just go and get my own needs met. And then I'm better for everyone else. So it's important to be able to understand how and where that fits. And for you, travel, being so attuned to yourself to go, something's feeling off. And then, having a look at your hierarchy and going, well, fuck, of course it's off. I haven't traveled for 9 months. I feel a bit stuck. I feel a bit rigid. I feel a bit flat. And then working out how you get that need met.
Yeah. So we're actually planning a holiday to Canada at the end of the year for Christmas, for a white Christmas, to go snowboarding. So that's part of it, like having stuff up around the house, like pictures of Canada, the flag, things like that. And then just starting to book things and do all that kind of thing. So it's really exciting. I can't wait. Would absolutely love to go to Bali in April though for my 40th birthday. So we'll see if that's possible with Canada.
Yeah.
But So you're very, very well-rounded, what it seems, individual, and you're at what looks like a very good place in your life. How did you end up where you are now? Tell me about the Blake story.
I haven't always been in a good place, trust me. So I'll quickly summarize the first half, and then I guess, go into a bit more detail in the last few years. So from a childhood point of view, it was super challenging is probably the best way to describe it. And really dysfunctional. And obviously everyone's doing their best, but I wouldn't really wish upon anyone the home environment that I had. And what I would wish upon people is, if you can find a way to turn that pain into a passion, it becomes super viable, in terms of my motivation, my why, and the way that I do life, and the motivation that I have for it is really a big byproduct of my upbringing. So in that part, I'm super grateful for what I went through, because I get to live a super passionate and motivated life. But to kind of speak, I guess, to the second stage, is I spent 15 years in the health and fitness space as a personal trainer, which again, absolutely loved for 14 out of the 15 years. And it was within the kind of last year that it just died within me. It was time to kind of move on and, essentially close the doors. And it wasn't long after this that I actually filed for bankruptcy. And filing for bankruptcy again in the moment was the worst possible thing that could possibly happen to me. But it also became the catalyst for me doing insane and intense amount of deep work to work out how I am, who I am, how I got into a position of bankruptcy, and just dive deep into mindset, human behavior, positive psychology, everything, around it. So it really became the catalyst for me in this work, and was the timing of it was really perfect, in terms of I was starting to kind of feel a bit dead and soulless in the health and fitness space, and, filed for bankruptcy, closed the business down. And in that next 18 months was by far the toughest 18 months of my life. And it just, I thought bankruptcy was bad. And most people would probably agree with me, but that was literally just the tip of the iceberg, and everything that could go wrong for a 15-month period went wrong. I got hired and fired from 3 jobs, applied for over 50 jobs and got rejected. My girlfriend, broke up with me. My car blew up. My computer got stolen. I found myself like directionless, purposeless, without any kind of money to my name, and I got to a point where I was like, and feeling super lonely, because I was going through a transition as a person as well, and feeling like the people that used to be my world didn't necessarily resonate anymore. And I just felt like the universe was stripping me apart to like bare basics. And I remember saying to my business partner, who wasn't my business partner at the time, we're just good friends, I was like, mate, I don't know what else I've got. Like, I don't have money, car, friends, direction, anything, but at least I feel like I've got my mental and physical health. And God bless him, there was absolutely no way that I had my mental health at that stage. He didn't say anything. And the week after that, I actually ended up in hospital with what they thought was meningococcal. And that was when, I used to think it was giving up, and I really struggled with giving up, that kind of, that probably almost unhealthy masculine energy of like, don't give up. Mm. But really, 4 years on now, I look at it more of like surrendering, of like, all right, I surrender. I'm going to stop fighting. Show me what you need to show me. And the moment that I finally surrendered, I hit the rock bottom with hospital, but it was only, I think, 5 days after that this idea of the men's business came to me. And I reached back out to that guy who I'd spoken of before. And he's like, fuck it, let's give it a crack. And then 6 weeks later, we had our first event in Sydney. So in the 15 months where shit hit the fan, it was also the fastest 15 months to the best position I've ever been in my life. So we started the men's business. And for me, at that rock bottom, and if anyone's been there, I'm sure they can attest to it, the thought of starting a business on my own, I was like, fuck, I'm exhausted. I can't do this again. So it was really good to be able to bring him in and work on it together. But as I said, as the 15-month capitulation, it was also 15 months and I was back like better than I've ever been. You know, the business started to take off. I started to run my own coaching business. You know, we moved to Byron Bay and we're just having the fucking time of our life. And it was wild that just how quickly my life completely disintegrated to pretty much the same period of time. And I was absolutely up and about. So that's a long-winded way of telling you, you know, where I've got to now. And, you know, coming up June this year, we've been in Byron Bay for 3 years and, you know, never felt better. So there's plenty of good to come from what was a pretty challenging time.
So what year did that difficult time start? And then when did that finish? What years are we talking about?
Yeah, it was 2000 and I want to say, yeah, it was 2018. So, because I actually got a memory come up a few days ago. So it was 2018. I bottomed out September 2019. And then the climb from September 2019 to now all happened really quickly.
Yeah. I'm going to say some really probably whacked stuff here for a moment. So excuse me for a second, but there's an Instagram channel called Forever Conscious. And the lady's name is Tanaz. And she's an Australian, but she lives in LA. And around that same time, my partner and I had been together for 10 years and 10 days from the day we met to the day we got married. After being together for 10 years, 7 months later, we broke up. So that's like crazy. Most people are like, what? Why would you even get married? There was nothing wrong. Like there was maybe some stuff, but nothing that would make you think you're going to break up, either of us. And that all happened. We got married in June of 2018 and it all fell apart towards the end of little cracks started to appear at the end of the year. We renovated our house in November of 2018. And then in February of 2019, we had a rip-roaring argument and it never went back the same ever again. And eventually that February of 2019 through to August when she moved out was a very, very difficult period. And so she left, she moved interstate and I kept our 4 kids. And it is what it is. It's just that by her words, she had a bit of a midlife crisis. Again, they're her words. And she just wanted to go off a different path. So yeah, it is what it is. But that you try to make sense of your world when something big like that happens, like a bankruptcy, a breakup, whatever. And I ended up looking stuff up. I knew that there was people out there that were kind of like these intuitive forecasters. And like universal forecasters. So they're like reading the weather, but they would tell you the weather based on the alignment of the planets. So I kind of already having a little bit of woo-woo side to my brain, sort of started looking this stuff up, came across this YouTube channel called Forever Conscious, and then connected with her then on Instagram. And everything, there was a whole bunch of stuff. As I was going through that in 2019, you could see, again, I can hear myself saying this, it's going to sound crazy, but the universe was like pulling things apart. There was so many people who went through breakups in that 2019 period, some in 2018, some still in 2020, and it happens all the time. But I bet there would be so many listeners out there that know people that broke up sometime around that 2019 period, slightly either side of that, or some major life transition has occurred, like a bankruptcy or some health concern, whatever it might be. And then everything started to come back together. And she, like, I don't want to make out like she's Nostradamus, but she essentially kind of predicted COVID. She's very, very modest, this girl, but she was saying, there's something big's going to happen. It's on a global level, blah, blah, blah. This was like 2019. And then of course it hit China, I think in November of 2019, and then Australia 2020. And then she kind of was sort of then saying this should start to end around May of 2022, which essentially it kind of did. So I actually believe that there was something that was kind of pulling things apart. Things needed to be burned to the ground in order for them to grow back again.
It's interesting you say that. I don't know. Again, I've got a lot of friends around me, a lot of our good girlfriends who are big on astrology and human design and, all those different ways of thinking, I guess, and being and modalities. And my understanding is that this year will also be one of those years. A lot of those people have said the same thing, that this is one of the years where anything that's like bullshit will essentially be called out or burnt down to the ground, and just the legit stuff will be standing. So it'll be interesting to see, whether it's whether you find yourself in a bullshit relationship, whether you're showing up on social media not as your true self, whatever it might be, that all of that will get cleaned out this year as well. So we'll have to check in this time next year and see if that comes to fruition as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. So what do you think was the lesson in your difficult time?
Mate, the simplest, well, I'll go the bankruptcy and then I'll go that 15 months. The simplest way to answer the bankruptcy is a complete lack of awareness and a out of control ego is probably the two best ways to describe it. And then for me now, I turn two of those challenges into strengths. And we've all got an ego and you never get rid of the ego, but having a healthy relationship with the ego is a really big part for me, and it's a work in progress. And I actually do a fair bit of kind of plant medicine, which is notorious for kind of helping level out the ego. So that's a big one. And for me, awareness is the superpower. You can't do much without real good awareness. So, off the back of the bankruptcy in particular, I've spent a lot of time doing awareness and a lot of time reflecting. And I think, obviously you're into personal development. If I look at my, let's say I started, showing interest in personal development from 18, and it was about 33 when the shit hit the fan. Most of my, I guess, quote unquote, personal development in that first 15 years really came from consuming content and other people's information. And when the bankruptcy happened, the script really flipped into me starting to be more aware of myself and master self. So if the first 15 years was knowledge mastery, and learning from all the greats around the world and the amazing thought leaders, the last 4 years has really been about self-mastery, paying attention to my thoughts, my beliefs, my behaviors, addictive tendencies, things like that. And, while I think there's room for both, and I think it's important to have both, having spent, 20 years now in the personal development game, am more inclined to encourage people to spend more time on self-mastery than knowledge mastery.
Yeah, interesting. And so that's 15-month period. How has that set you up now for where you're at?
Yeah, I mean, I did a post actually on this on social media yesterday. For me, it was really, there's a term called the dark night of the soul, which for a lot of people is when their whole world crumbles in order to rebirth what is true and aligned for them. And, I mentioned this yesterday on the post, like, had I known what I was going through, it would have made it a lot, I'll say safer, because it literally was, I was very close to kind of pulling the pin on life. But, what it set me up for is what needed to be burnt down in order for the new to come through. And again, if I had someone, all I needed was one person there, or one person to explain to me what I was going through. And they'd just be like, hey, dude, you're just going through a dark night of the soul. Everything's going to fucking burn down to the ground and the new year's going to be born. And it had to happen. There was, in hindsight, nothing was aligned. And I think if most people were really sit in, stillness and silence and solitude and sit with their own thoughts, they'd probably have the same kind of noise that not much is aligned. And that's, one of the reasons a lot of people keep themselves busy is because they don't want to, face the truth. And it sucks that it had to go to that level, but in the same breath, it also, and in hindsight and now at the other side, mate, like, I'm stoked that it all got burnt down. It had to. So, that's a big part. And I think for me, being able now to be the support person as a lot of these people go through this transition is amazing, because it's what, so often what we teach is what we needed at the time. And all I needed then was someone by my side to be able to hold space properly and just to support me. And again, everyone's doing the best they can with what they got. There was a lot of things that were pretty heavy, but the hardest thing was probably going through that and feeling like I was alone in that. And, I never want anyone to go through that. And I never want anyone to, not allow anyone to go through that on their own. And I don't want anyone to not understand it, because it got dark. It got really dark. And I did have, the darkest of thoughts, albeit briefly, of is this worth it? And, I don't, as I'm sure you're aware, the biggest killer of men under 45 is suicide. I just want to be the person or a person who can support people through the transition and support them into being a better version of themselves. And, for a lot of people, they don't have that person.
Yeah. Well, thankfully for me, I never got to that point mentally, but it was a difficult time. And it's one that now, when I reflect on in hindsight, I'm so grateful for that experience. What's the one thing that you would say to someone, and you work with these people in your business, what's the one thing that you would say to someone that's going through that right now, where everything's burning to the ground?
It's hard to keep it to one thing, but
feel free to go and say 10 things.
Yeah. Well, there's a few things. I think that the big thing is, one of the big things was just like, how do you win the day? Because the thought of the future can be really challenging at times. And I used to think, people talking about a bleak future was a metaphor, until I saw the bleak future. I was like, oh, this isn't a metaphor. This is legit. And it was a case of when I was in it and my mind would wander the future, and it was so bleak and pixelated and gray, and I couldn't see anything. I was like, holy fuck, this ain't a metaphor. This is legit. So for me, it was a case of how do I just win the day? And that was a case of understanding my values and just win the day. So that was a really big piece. And, I guess the thing that I was missing that I would encourage everyone to have and to be that person is to be the person who really understands what deep listening looks like, and to allow people to feel safe, seen, and supported. And I think, if you can develop that superpower, your connections will go to a new level, because not a huge amount of people, one, have that type of person in their life, and not a lot of people are that person. I remember a statistic, it was an American statistic, but it was 40% of Americans resonate with the statement, no one truly sees me. 4 out of 10 people have no one in their life that truly sees them. As of all the statistics I've heard in my years, that is as heartbreaking as any, to think that life is challenging, like it is. And to have to do it on your own is fucked, is really hard. And I don't wish that upon anyone. So those would be a couple of things that I guess really stand out for me. And, again, it's easy now on the other side and living my best life to smile and say how good it is that I went through that. But when you're in it, it fucking sucks, and I guess one of the most frustrating statement someone could make to you is one that I actually made to myself. And it is, how is this happening for me, not to me? And again, if someone said that to me at the time when I was in it, I'd be like, go fuck yourself. I do not need that statement right now. But for me to say it to myself and just to keep coming back to how is this happening for me? How is this happening for me? Was one of the statements that I just carried with me through that, 15-month period.
Yeah. And you mentioned your girlfriend a couple of times. And so she's come into your life, and it sounds like she's had a profound impact. What does she mean to you now?
Mate, she every time I speak about her, I get emotional. Just because she's I've done all the coaching, I've done all the modalities, I've done a lot of work, but no one and nothing could heal me quite the way that she has. And it's just it's a love that I'd love everyone to experience, and I've been fortunate to be in some really kind of beautiful relationships. And this is what I've been missing all my life, even from my upbringing. And again, my parents did the best that they could, but this is the love that I hope every child feels, let alone being in an intimate relationship. And the level of purity in the love and the environment that we've created for our relationship just allows us to be ourselves and just to go and chase whatever it is that we want to chase in life. And again, it sounds obvious, like you want to be in a relationship where you can be yourself, but working with a lot of couples and speaking to a lot of people, it's not that common. So there's a real liberation and freedom that comes in the relationship. And I think, if we're all to kind of really tune into what we want, liberation and freedom would be quite high for a lot of people. I want to feel liberated. I want to feel free. I want to be myself, and I want to be loved for who I am, and, the core of all of us, we all do, we all want to be loved for just who we are. And that for me is an inspiration every day. And it drives me even more to want to be better, for her. We've got a little saying, for me, for you, for us, like what we do, I'm doing it for me, I'm doing it for her, and I'm doing it for us. And it just continues to drive me and make me, more passionate every day. And, again, more passionate for me, for her, for us. So, mate, she's been an absolute godsend.
That's awesome. And I believe that the universe has sent it to you exactly when you needed her.
Yeah, mate. Yeah. And, I was talking about this on our podcast last week. Like, I wish everyone could experience what I've experienced over the last 18 months. I wish there were however many millions and billions of Shani Tims that could nourish relationships the way that she's nourished me in our relationship. It's just been unbelievable. So, yeah, I feel super fortunate and blessed. And, it's easy to kind of throw around those terms in that honeymoon period, in the early stages of a relationship. But even 18 months on, there's still such a deep gratitude for her and what we've created and the person that she is. And, just the way that she's, so heart-centered and does life is just so inspiring. And something that even, for me, I really aspire to come more back into my body and more into my heart. And no one does it better than, my girlfriend.
So what about, let's go through a sliding doors type moment. What about if she came into your life earlier? Would you not want that? Are you glad she's come now and not earlier, or maybe not later? Like,
yeah, it's interesting. I've always wanted her, in terms of the love that she gives and the person that she is. But I also don't think that the work that I did between my last relationship and this allowed me to be the person that attracted her. So often people are like, I want to find the perfect partner. It's like, well, and perfect's such an interesting word. So quote unquote, I'll put it in quotes, but like, what about you doing the work to be the perfect partner? Do you know what I mean? People just like, oh, I want the perfect partner. Cool. You've got a lot of work to do yourself, as we all do. So, between the last relationship and this, I did a huge amount of work on myself and a huge amount of work on understanding what it takes to be a good partner and create a good relationship. And there's only a couple of people that saw just the amounts of work that I did, one of them being my business partner. And, for that reason, exactly as you said, the universe, I guess, rewarded me for, the work that I'd done and the healing and the growth that I needed to go through in order to attract someone like this. And, if we take it back 5 years, she was a fair party girl and I was a bit of a dick. So it wouldn't have been right timing if it was any earlier. And, who knows what it could have looked like if it was any later. But, as you're aware, like the universe, is perfect in its timing, whether we can see it in the moment or not. And for that reason, the timing was spot on.
I'm so glad you touched on that, because I think it is so important that you do meet at the right time. And so, because things might not work out the way they're meant to be. I also think that the universe will give you what you need, and continue to put it in front of you until you pay attention. I come across this, and it may not be manifestation, call it what you want, but there's this manifestation type story of, if you're finishing high school and you're going to apply for universities, and let's just say University of Queensland, one of the biggest universities in Australia, and you're applying and you really want to get into this university, UQ, like, instead of manifesting getting into UQ, what it was suggesting was manifest the right university for you, because University of Queensland might not be the right university for you in terms of your later in life type stuff, where you might need, you might need to go to QUT, Queensland University of Technology, where you need to, because that's where you're going to meet your future husband or wife. Doesn't mean that it won't happen. The universe might put it there in front of you at some point later on in life. You end up going to UQ. It just delays meeting that person, and maybe they just come for a one day, and you run into each other. But I'm so fascinated with sliding doors that's why I bring it up. And I'm glad that you say that, because I do think that timing is everything, and doing the work so that you are in order, like you said, you needed to work on yourself. She needed to do stuff with herself, so that when you did meet, it was the right time for the both of you, for you, for me, for us. I love it.
Yeah, mate, use it. Yeah, we're super fortunate, and a lot of what we do in the world that we've created is just this good bubble that we just want to keep quite, insular in terms of our environment. And I'm really big on that. And I think, with each year that goes by, I'm getting bigger on just setting really healthy boundaries to protect us and to protect our energy and to protect our inner circle. And, we're very fortunate. We've got a lot of really good people around us, and a lot of people on a similar path and page. There's across our, 3 programs, there's over 100 people who are all wanting to grow and be better and, kind of heal together. So, despite, I guess having really good reach for, people, like-minded people, we are still very protective of our energy and, and who comes into our inner circle, and protecting, the love and the energy that we've got. So that's a big bit as well.
Yeah. You mentioned plant medicine. How much can you talk about that? Because I'm really interested in this.
Mate, I can talk about it a lot. I'm obviously mindful of the logistics, in particular in Australia, of plant medicine. But for me, it's played a massive role. I've tried a lot of different plant medicine. I think I probably had 20 to 25 different journeys across kind of ayahuasca, San Pedro, MDMA therapy, mushrooms, going to do a thing called Bufo quite soon, 5-MeO DMT. Even things like Vipassana, 10-day silent meditation retreat. There's a lot that I've tried, and for a number of reasons. One, obviously the healing modalities and the research that's behind it's like second to none. 2, because I love a good kind of adventure and trying a new experience. And 3, because I don't think from an integrity point of view, it's okay for me to recommend something to a client that I haven't been and done myself. So, mate, they've all played a big role, and they've all been so different in terms of their experience. And for me, I've probably had, over 250 therapy sessions across different modalities as well, whether it's NLP, hypnosis, energetic work, psychology, psychotherapy, whatever it might be. And the plant medicine just becomes a really valuable add-on, and often a fast growth, healing expansion to your answer. Sometimes, in a recent ceremony, something that I wasn't able to get to the bottom of for probably close to 20 years came up in ceremony in the first 2 minutes. I was like, fuck, that reminds me of the power of this thing. So I think there's room for both. We're at a really interesting time, and without kind of getting too political, of what these plants and medicine can do, and whether big pharma thinks it's a good idea. All of this stuff came up in the 60s and 70s, and it was shut down. And I have my challenging beliefs around big pharma. I think they've got a place, but probably not to the extent and level that they infiltrating society. And it would massively impact them if people started to take control of their own health, and if they started to use, plant medicine as a healing modality. What I will say to that is just to be super cautious. I would never recommend going and doing it without feeling really called to it. And secondly, I would never do it without a really experienced facilitator who can be there with you to help you go through the process. So, mate, I think it's got a huge place in healing, growth, expansion. But there's a lot of red tape around it, unfortunately, in particular in Australia.
So how do you, if someone's interested in it, how do they typically find out more and know that they've got a good, yeah, I bet.
It's really hard. For obvious reasons, because most of it's illegal in Australia. It's an underground operation. So unless you know someone who's done it, it becomes really challenging to kind of get your foot in the door. And I remember, initially wanting to do it, and it took me ages to find the right opening. Because a lot of these guys, and understandably for so many reasons, are very cautious of, recommending, like, unless it was a personal recommendation, it would make sense not to, like, if someone messaged me on Instagram and I don't know them personally, there's no way that I would possibly recommend them, just because, someone might find themselves in trouble or it might not be a fit. So through personal recommendations is generally how this stuff happens. And, overseas, the science is really clear, whether it's the Johns Hopkins Institute, whether it's the MAPS, organization, that the science behind MDMA therapy, the science behind, psilocybin psycho-assisted therapy is fucking mind-blowing. So the science is there. Again, we just got to be mindful of what it looks like with this red tape and, the I'll say corruption, but I'll say it quietly, that happens within some of these organizations that block this stuff going through as well. Yeah.
Super interesting. So what's next for you? Where are you going from here?
Mate, it's we're probably going really more into, for me, I'm always growing, learning and expanding, which is so cool because so many of my clients get to come along for that ride. And beyond that, we're loving the podcast and where it's going. And probably the big add-on and the next step is retreats. We put together a retreat for April and it sold out in like 7 hours. And then we kind of, half sold the May one already. And, after the last couple of years of not having much in-person stuff, we really want to get back to that, myself as an individual, but also me and my business partner. The last couple of years has been obviously challenging for a lot of people. And for us, it's been a really good chance to just knuckle down and get good at our craft, in between the two of us, because we actually live together as well. We've been able just to spend, I'll say hundreds, but probably thousands of hours fine-tuning our craft, fine-tuning the way that we want to position ourselves in the world, and, getting really good at some of these kind of modalities that we use for our coaching, and our transformations. And that's always a work in progress. We're always evolving, but we're ready to really have some in-person impact, whether that's retreats, with April and May, or whether that's some kind of in-person one-day events or something like that. And, loneliness is a serious epidemic that probably still isn't getting the attention that it deserves. And a big part of loneliness is, having a lack of like-minded people. You can have 100 people around you, but if you're on a different page from them, you're still going to feel a bit lonely. So we really want to be the catalyst for like-minded people getting together, having big, transformations and experiences and connecting through, like-minded interests.
So where are your 2 retreats to in April and May?
So in God's country, my friend, in Byron, they're just up the road from us, which is awesome. And yeah, we've got crew coming in from, around Australia, which is cool. A lot of our crew these days is actually up in Gold Coast. So, the way that we position ourselves, both Genoa and I, both as a business and also individually, is we want to be friends with our clients, so whether it's some of the boys that we'll go to the footy with, and then the next week we're talking about, emotional intelligence, like we want to be those relatable guys who, still do the kind of Aussie things while still heavily invested and interested in, personal development and healing and growth and expansion. So it's a cool world that we've set up for ourselves.
Yeah, it's very cool. So how can people find out more about you, the retreats, the coaching, everything that you've got going on? How can people connect?
Mate, the best way would be, like most people these days, is on Instagram. So at Blake Worrall Thompson. And I talk pretty often there about everything that's going on, whether it's programs, retreats, and hopefully, you find something of value there, which is, at the cornerstone of what I want to do is to provide value. And, if my big thing always with coaching, whatever it looks like, whether it's a retreat, it's just finding someone that's like-minded. There's so many good coaches out there, and it's really important that you find the right person for you. So if that's the case, awesome. If not, the very least that I hope I can do is provide some kind of value for you on socials.
Yeah, I think you're sharing some really cool stuff on Instagram. Blake, I want to thank you, first of all, for your time on the Mind Your Body show. And I would love to acknowledge you for all of the work that you're doing, the burning to the ground that you went through in order to flourish and become nice and green and full of life again. Acknowledge you for the work you did. And then for all of the help and support you give to other people. But it's not time to go just yet, because now it's time for 10 and 10. So sit back, relax, and get comfy, because as you've been talking, I've been writing notes, and awesome. I'm going to go through and get your first thought. If you want to go on a tangent and talk for 10 minutes on any of these, please feel free to do so. Number 1, woo-woo.
Keen for all of what it looks like.
Number 2, breaking your year up.
One of the best things that you can do to review your life, rinse, make the necessary changes, and repeat, go again.
Number 3, what does living your life by design mean?
It means what is ever true for you, and breaking away from the conditioning and programming that we're all wrapped in order to design the life and the way that you want it.
Number 4, morning routines.
The single-handedly probably the most important thing that you can do is getting the morning routine right, whether that's 5 minutes, 50 minutes, or if you're in a very fortunate position like I am, 5 hours.
That's a seriously long time.
That's long.
What do you do again? What does this 5 hours encompass?
So up at 5 a.m. for meditation and journaling, and then 6 till 8 is the gym, home for food, do an hour of reading and check in with my girlfriend, and then start the day at 10.
Yeah. And what sort of reading is it?
Whatever I'm kind of researching at the moment. And I mean, it's always kind of personal development, human behavior. And because a lot of the guys that I work with have been with me for a long time, I always need to be upskilling and be one step ahead. So I'm always on the tools in terms of reading and learning.
Well, that's a credit to you, and that's well done of you for always trying to stay ahead of those.
Got to stay ahead, brother.
Keep it up. Number 5, self-care.
Replace selfish with self-care, and always make sure that you're filling your cup and you're giving from the overflow that is the cup.
Number 6, what is your why?
My why is my family, and they've all at different stages struggled with their own mental health. And I want to make sure that 1, I don't individually, again, and 2, that I can have an impact on people to make sure that they don't go through the struggles that my family's been through.
Number 7, men's business.
Big. Very big. And I'm mindful that I have a slight bias being in the men's space, but I feel like it's grown a lot over the last kind of 3 to 4 years. And I'm excited to see the growth over the next 5 years for everyone, for men and their mental health, but also for all the people that are in their worlds, whether it's girlfriends, boyfriends, husbands, wives, everyone's impacted by men's mental health and at times the lack of mental health. So I'm excited to see this space evolve.
Yeah. Number 8, plant medicine.
Big. And I can't wait for the day that it becomes legalized in Australia.
Do you reckon that will happen? Do you think that?
Again, there's a lot of red tape, and I don't want to get kind of too political on it, but it'll be challenging to see it come through. But there's a lot of people trialing it and seeing the value in it. And if that means that it remains underground, it's a space that's growing very quickly.
Number 9 is one word and it's love, but I'm going to change it a little bit. And I want to ask you a question. What is love to you?
Great question. So love is, I look at love in a number of different ways. And I think when I really looked into it, I realized that a lot of what society deems as love is questionable in terms of love has no boundaries. Love has no conditions. And when we look at the way that love is done in society, it comes with a contract, it comes with conditions, it comes with control. And none of that for me is the true essence of what love is. Love is endless, unconditional, has no bounds. And when you see it in its purest form, it's amazing.
I'm pausing for a second there because I wanted that moment between you finishing talking and me starting to talk, because that right there is an Instagram reel that's going to promote that episode. That as soon as you started saying that, I was like, my goodness, this right here is
Unreal.
a promo.
Unreal.
Number 10 is the last question, and it's a generic question which I ask everybody. I'm really intrigued by this question. I love pondering it all the time. And it is, if you could go forward in time or back in time, which would you go to and why? And what point in time? This is also a time traveling activity. So I'll talk a little bit while you're thinking. And it means you can come back to now, because sometimes people go, oh, well, I don't want to go forward in the future, and then get stuck and I'll come back and see my family and friends. So you can time travel, but you can only go, someone comes along with the DeLorean and they're like, hey, Blake, you can go forward a time and back a time. Where do you want to go to? But you can only go once. So where would it be?
I'd probably go back into that 15 months and just let myself know that this is amazing for me. And it'll be one of the most pivotal things I ever go through. And just to allow myself to be like, okay, I'm going to ride this wave. That's where I'd go.
That's really interesting. You don't normally hear anyone say anything like that. So
yeah, because I mean, mate, it got dark. It got really dark. The thought of ending my life because I didn't know what I was going through and I had no one to talk to about it. All it took was one person to explain to me what I was going through, or one person to potentially have even been through it. And I would have been just like, oh, this is just a really challenging stage of my life, but it's going to be valuable. But no one anywhere in my environment at that stage could communicate that to me. So I was like, fuck, this is my life. This is it. So to have that voice be, mate, this is just Start Night of Soul. It's a new initiation. You burn everything down to the ground. It's going to be better after. I would have been like, cool, I'll ride it.
So you kind of answered this there, but let's just say Blake at that age and Blake right now, if they're two different people, Blake right now jumps in the DeLorean, goes to that point in time, and he sits there. What would that look like? What would it feel like? What would it sound like? But what would that interaction look like? These two guys who are the same person.
There'd be an unwavering sense that everything's going to be all right. That's the difference. There'd be an unwavering sense that everything's going to be all right. And there'd be ups and downs, and my nervous system would be challenged at times, and I'd be depressed and anxious and everything that comes in that. But I'd always come back to this baseline of like, everything's going to be all right.
That's awesome. And I don't know how to end that any better. So, Blake, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Mind Your Body Show.
Appreciate you for having me, Jacob.
Thank you for joining us today on the Mind Your Body Show. If you would like to connect, please head on over to Instagram and follow us at Jacob_Andre. And you can get all of our show notes as well as all of our other episodes from the Mind Your Body Show over on my website at jacobandre.com, as well as the blog articles, which I write on a regular basis, and a whole bunch of other really cool tips, tricks, and actionable strategies to help you maximize your performance so you can succeed at the top level. Thank you again, and I'll see you soon.